Like, look, if I'm playing a game, I want to be, most guys, 70% of guys want to be who they can't be in the real world. That's what they want out of their experiences, at least at this kind of game, you know? And my mind has changed a little bit on that. We're going to get into the topic of why men have such an uninterested experience playing women in video games, right? We'll kick it off with Helldivers and something that, and this is not about DEI. It is, but the topic is not. But it just happens that this is what kicks the topic off. You know what I think about DEI? I know what a lot of you guys think about DEI. It's irrelevant. I don't really care about that right now. The creative director and former head of the company, Arrowhead, that makes Helldivers, Helldivers 2 said this: if DEI doesn't add to the game experience, it detracts, and games should be a pure pursuit of amazing moments. Now, I don't agree with this. I do agree that there should and can be games that are overtly not about anything except the surface material, right? There's no you can't help when you create anything, when you do anything, there's always going to be subtext, but certainly subtext to the point that it's barely thought about, if at all, by the creators. And if you pick up subtext, that's great. That's for you. I think there should and can be, and there is, a lot of great entertainment that comes from that philosophy. However, I would push back, as a number of people have had on this statement, to suggest that Helldivers 2 is not commenting on contemporary politics is a little goofy. It may not be on the nose, and I think that may be a good way to do it, but to say that it's not dealing with fascism and xenophobia and propaganda that tells you something is patriotic just to get you to go fight and risk your lives for the sake of the powerful, you're a fucking moron if you don't see that. But I do take his point, right? And the reason that even comes up to kick off the topic is there's another story floating around from yesterday. CD Projekt Red claims The Witcher 4. This is the headline. Now, you have to be careful, but the headline's kind of correct. The headline is from that Park Place that is very much sort of anti-woke stuff. CD Projekt Red claims The Witcher 4 will tackle a woman's struggle in a medieval world. I won't read you the whole thing, but this is the Germain part. Germain, get over here. Give me a hanky. As an example, in The Witcher, this is the creatives of The Witcher, they say that we deal a lot with racism when it comes to non-humans in the game, and this is something we want to keep up with The Witcher 4. I think it's something that has always been really important. We make games for adults, and that also means we tackle difficult subjects. We tackle them in interesting ways. We tackle them without giving easy answers, but often opening difficult questions that players have to answer. And I think some of those questions might be going in this direction as well for The Witcher 4, because yes, Ciri is a woman, and as a Witcher in this world, that's unusual. So I don't think this is going to be this story everywhere, but since this is a part of the world and we want to tackle that, it's going to appear there as well. Meaning basically that Ciri being a woman Witcher and how the people respond to that in the world, especially if you've already seen in the trailer, they were like, oh my God, hubbub, it's a woman, is going to be part of it. And so I bring it up as it relates to two things. One is the whole thing from the Arrowhead guys, the idea that games shouldn't be about things or shouldn't tackle subjects that are beyond just like cool explosion moment. That's awesome. I think that can be great, but to say that as a blanket statement, I think is quite stupid. But as it relates to the main topic of the day, which is why a lot of guys are upset about this, to begin with, a guy like me who's pretty lefty, the most progressive fella you've ever met in your existence, aka me, I like playing women characters, even to the point that, and I'm going to share some stats with you in a second. That's why I'm leading into this. But I like playing female characters in video games for a variety of reasons, even to the point that I'm playing Dragon Age Veilguard right now, loving that game. And I started playing the game as a guy only because so many people in my chat forever have been like, dude, I always play as a guy. It's like, it's the guy I want to be and all this shit. And I usually don't do that. But I'm like, all right, let me make a guy character. The minute I start to romance the ladies, and you can romance whoever you want, but I choose to romance the ladies because that's my cup of tea. And I'm romancing the ladies in the game, and it starts to feel a little awkward to me. Maybe, but I'll get to the reasons why in a minute. If I forget, somebody in the chat, if you're interested, ask me why was that awkward? And so I immediately changed my character. Like, you can go to this magic mirror and you can change her look and everything. And she became a woman. And now I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I got sexy ladies, going at each other. This is a lot of fun, right? But most men, 70% of men choose to play male characters, and they feel really strongly about it, right? There is a thread, and I want to tell you why in a second, because I looked into all this. Like, what are the 30% of men that like playing women characters? What is that about? And does it translate to race? And does it translate to different ages? It's really interesting stuff. But there's a very popular thread right now going on over at NeoGAF. And the title is, I Don't Like Female Protagonists. It's by a guy who likes to call himself Double Clutch. Okay. And these are some of the choice points of his post. He says, look, I just don't find female protagonists relatable. I don't understand why this is considered a blasphemous opinion. The same people lambasting me for holding this opinion are the ones pushing for female protagonists on the basis of inclusivity. There are some exceptions where I'm okay with it, such as Lara Croft or Jill Valentine, but even then I would still prefer playing as Nathan Drake or Leon, but I can accept those others. What I can't accept is Ghost of Yodi, Chloe Nadine from Uncharted, Assassin's Creed Cassandra, Ellie from Last of Us, Kate in Gears of War, etc. The fact that the majority of men don't want to play as women, and the only way they accept it is if a highly attractive woman whose ass they can stare at. That's reality, and even then I'm not a slave to sex. I'd prefer playing as a cool dude, more than even a hot female if I had the choice. This was well written and a good point. He says, good fantasy is an extrapolation of observable innate characteristics, not a turning of reality upside down. I don't always agree with that, but it's a good point. I'll read it again. Good fantasy is an extrapolation of observable innate characteristics, right? So you take the essence of a human and you say, okay, let me build that out into something dramatic, but it still comes from a place of core reality that you can relate to. He says, it's not about turning that reality upside down. It's a good point. He says, example, Special Forces Commando comes home and wages a one-man war against the mob to save his town. Unrealistic, but enjoyable. But then he says, a woman picks up a sword and slays every man in sight. In that story, men are cowards and relying on her to save everybody. That's stupid, he says. Okay. And then this obviously gave rise to a number of people mostly agreeing with him, but it's NeoGAF, so they kind of lean that way. But now I want to get to some of these stats, and then I want to go to you guys in the chat and see what you think about this. Again, if you have a thought on this and you want to call in and discuss it, put yourself in the call-in waiting room on the Discord. You'll be vetted over there. Make sure you got something fun to say, interesting to say, and then we'll put you on the show. Let me drink a bit of the bubbly, and then we'll get to the research, and then we'll get to the chat. Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to find out, there's a lot of research about avatars and why we pick the avatars that we pick. And I wanted to find out why a lot of people do tend to pick male characters over female characters if you are a guy, right? And what they said was this. They said that 70% of men will pick male characters, and they said 30% will pick the female character. And at first I said, okay, well, I'm in that 30%. So explain to me why 30%, what are those people? And they say the 30% do it because of design motivations. And what that is aesthetic appeal, choosing a character because they find it visually pleasing. That's one of the reasons I do it, probably the main reason. Customization options. It says enjoying the process of creating or altering a character to fit their idealized version. A lot of times there's more things to do with women avatars, like they have crazy hair and crazy clothes and crazy makeup, blah, blah, blah. And then expressions of creativity. It's basically the player's desire to engage with visual and artistic elements of the game rather than purely gameplay mechanics or narrative roles. But then I said, okay, but what about the 70%? If you're 70%, why do you pick that? What does that mean about those men? And here's what it said. It said, the main reason is identity alignment. Many male gamers may choose male avatars because they align with their real-life gender, making it easier to project themselves into the game. This self-representation helps to create a stronger sense of immersion and identification with the character. And then you get into things like traditional gender roles, power and agency. It says research suggests women who prefer male avatars tend to do it because they like destruction motivations and chaos and mayhem, right? So it's about identifying what society says a man is and a woman is, and saying if you're a woman and you like that chaos that society says men represent, they will pick that. But it's a very small percentage. It's like 9%, right? And so my point is this. When I see these stats, it makes it difficult to automatically just say, if you don't want to play as a female character, you must be some mouth-breathing moron, because that's a lot of the position from the left. And I've had that position before. I've been like, Jesus, how many times you played a male character? Open up your fucking mind. And people are kind of like, it's entertainment. I'm not eating my vegetables. I prefer to play a male character because for those people, they identify with it more, and they're able to get more immersed in it. Now, I will tell you, I mean, I am playing right now Dragon Age as a female rook, which is the main character. Other than the cutscenes, I do not pay attention to my character. It's a third-person game. This study also goes into things like first-person, third-person, right? And a lot of people, when they play first-person, they say it's more immersive. And I've heard people say that. My brother says that. On the rare case he'll play games, he likes first-person because he feels it's more of an immersive environment experience. And I'm just kind of like, I'm immersed in the game, but I'm not immersed in like, I feel that I'm Indiana Jones, or I feel that I'm just as immersed in Dragon Age from a third person as I am in Indiana Jones from a first person. The study did say that in virtual reality, first person perspective is more effective in promoting empathy towards virtual characters. So I thought that was interesting. The idea that maybe in GTA, you would go up and, have sex with a prostitute, then kill her afterwards in order to take her money. But in VR, maybe you wouldn't do that because the mind has more of an empathy towards those characters in VR. All of that's fascinating, even to the point that when we were starting with PlayStation and we were doing our first 3D game, which was canceled, called Space Adventure, we would spend days debating and discussing like what's better, third person or first person, because we didn't really know then. And we still kind of don't know. But it does seem to be that most people, for whatever reason, I don't know why I'm an outlier, will play first person and they'll feel more immersed, right? Same thing, by the way, with racial representation in games. Studies have found that video games often underrepresented non-white characters, right? So this is a 10-year-old study, but they said 10 years ago, 67% of main characters were white in games and only 3% were black and 1% were Latino, right? The only difference would be in sports games where you're probably going, the real world has made that particular athlete aspirational. And so I want to be that. So it's always the power fantasy. It's got nothing to do with anything else except just the power fantasy for a lot of these guys. There was another study that said Grand Theft Auto found black gamers reported higher identification with black characters, which influenced their gaming experience. So I bring all of this up because I am absolutely fascinated by the lack of research and, more importantly, the lack of knowledge around how games affect us, right? First person, third person, male or female, my race or another race. Why, for example, Stellar Blade, right? A lot of these anti-DEI guys are like, oh, Stellar Blade, that's what we've been wanting. That's what we've been. Well, no, it's not. Because the sales show that it's not. It's not that it was a failure of a game. It was a successful game for what it cost. Great. But fundamentally, most guys don't want to play even a sexy character, according to the studies and according to the anecdotal NeoGAF conversation. So it's almost like, whether you're talking about Lara Croft was an outlier. I don't think you can cite Lara Croft. It was a different time. It was the first time a game had really done that. There was a novelty about it. It was also a great game. I think the fact that most men who do comprise most console gamers want to play as men, I think that probably explains why Stellar Blade was a hit, but not a massive hit, right? Or why, if you look at the stats for Resident Evil 2, I think it was like 70-80% of guys first picked, because you could pick Claire Redfield or the other dude, and most people picked the dude. I picked Claire. So I just think it's all very, very interesting. And it leads into the question of kind of what is a game and what do we know about games? And that leads into a Ken Levine article about video games, and that leads into AAA developers getting older. But I want to go to the chat. I want to see if there's also any calls. I see some people in the waiting room. Tech Protect, let me know if anybody's worth bringing on. But I want to go to the chat and see what you guys feel about this, because I thought this was really, really fascinating. I was also curious, by the way, about how much of this is affecting PlayStation's inability to connect with family titles, right? Astrobot, game of the year for a lot of people, sold okay, but not amazing. Sackboy's Big Adventure, great fucking game, bombed. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, one of the best games first party ever put out, did barely broke even. Puppeteer, on and on and on and on, right? They just can't do it. And I'm like, and I checked into this too. I was like, okay, is there something about playing childish characters or characters that are anthropomorphic, like little ratchets or, astrobots, that the older you get, the more uncomfortable you are with that. And that turned out, at least according to this one study, is the opposite, which was to say that the older you get, more and more people become more secure in themselves and have a sense of self-awareness. And so they can play around with avatar experiment. They can different genders. They can try different ages. They can try out, I'm comfortable playing Crash Bandicoot, right? And I assumed that would actually be younger, that younger kids would be more comfortable with that. But it actually said younger kids, when they're trying to figure out who they are very locked into society's idea of what it means to be their gender, their age, their race, and you kind of grow out of that. So my theory, which was this is maybe one of the reasons PlayStation, which always skews older, struggles with the family market, while Nintendo, which skews younger, always hits the family market. That theory is just fucking wrong. So I don't fucking know why it is. Let me go to the chat. Well, 2D Man, you're wrong according to stats. He says, overall, I think most people don't care. Fun gameplay is what hooks people regardless of what a character looks like. It's just simply not true, though. Fun gameplay is only available to you if you've played a demo or after you've downloaded the game. But clearly there is a barrier for a lot of men and women, but since most console action gamers are men, it seems, to them, they won't even download it. If you tell them, hey, you're playing as a woman, I mean, how many people have downvoted Intergalactic on YouTube? How many people have downvoted The Witcher 4, even though The Witcher 3 is some of their favorite games? Because, and I know Intergalactic's a little bit different because there's other elements at play, but there's nothing about The Witcher 4 character. I mean, she's a good-looking woman. She's an attractive woman. So it's not that. It's not some kind of uglification of women that these guys always claim. It's a lot of people just don't want to play a woman. So the idea, 2D, that the gameplay rules, it simply doesn't. At least not when you're talking about sort of sales of a game. I played Cyberpunk as a female, says One Pump. I did too. And my girlfriend, brother, and normie friends thought it was weird. Is it a society thing? Yes. I played as a female as well because I wanted to be a woman, not in terms of my real life, but I wanted to have the voice and I wanted to see her. And what I was going to say about Dragon Age, because I played, what's her name, V or Z or whatever. I played her as a woman, and when she would have sex in the game, it was with other women, right? And I was like, when I did the Dragon Age thing, I was like, why does it feel weird for me to be the male Rook and have sex with Nev or Harding or any of the women characters? And I think it was because, and maybe this is kind of like a psychological dig at myself, and maybe it's about my own sense of how I view myself, but I view myself as a very charismatic, very capable human male, but Rook in the game is like all the things I'm not, right? He's buff and big and he's strong and he's action first and all that stuff. And I would rather have the titillating visual of two women flirting and supposedly going at it than something where it's like, I'm supposed to be this guy that I just don't relate to. I don't aspire to be Rook, because I could never be Rook. Now, when I was younger, when I did Kratos, that, even though I didn't want to be an asshole, but I was like, that was sort of the alpha male that I never was, that I wanted to be. But as I've gotten older, I think I've probably gotten more comfortable going, I'm never going to be that. And so it feels weird to sort of role play that in some way in a video game when I'd rather just watch sexy lesbians go at it. I think that's what it is. Men want to be immersed in the game, says Everett. So of course you're going to want to play as male. Still hype for Ghost 2 and Intergalactic, even if they are female. Yeah. And again, that's the other thing. To me, my immersion isn't really affected either way, other than if we're talking about the sex stuff we just talked about. Depends on the game, says PK. If you made Kratos a woman, she wouldn't represent the same type of brutality. I think she would represent the inner rage that everyone feels. I think that's universal, but certainly there would be the male power fantasy would not be reflected. Da Vinci says you must separate women from wokeness in order to have a take that reflects reality. A woke character in general is the issue. No, it's not. If we're talking about The Witcher 4, if you're talking about Intergalactic, Naughty Dog has planted enough seeds and done enough in that trailer to suggest you may be right. But for Witcher 4, which is where this article was from, I don't think that's correct. My immersion, says Matthew, is not predicated on the sex of the character. Mine isn't either, probably, at least in certain, except certain situations like I just described. But clearly, a lot of guys, it is 70%. Okay, let me bring in, I'm not sure because the names for whatever reason are small on my screen, but hey, it's Jaffe, you're on. I'm not sure who I'm talking with though. You think this is a fascinating topic. You think it's not ubiquitous because you were saying Metroid and Half-Life Alyx, people don't have a problem with it, right?
Right? Like you're playing as a girl, and that doesn't even come into play or as an issue for Half-Life Alyx, because it's like partially that can be attributed to studio pedigree and people just wanting to play the next entry in the Half-Life franchise or something like that. And with Metroid, it was a surprise. But even other games like Final Fantasy, where you play as a diverse cast of men, women, and animals, some people just have an inherent tolerance based on the genres they play that's higher, right? Like if you grew up playing platformers where you're all these colorful characters, that's why Lara Croft succeeded, because we're used to playing as bandicoots, Mario as a plumber. It doesn't matter. As long as the gameplay is fun, that's being satiated. Now with these AAA games trying to interject more story, you're also getting more perspective, but sometimes we're lacking nuance in the way that that's depicted, and that's where that anti-woke rejection comes in. Like I was watching Suicide Squad with my trans roommate last night, and there's a trans character or not Suicide Squad, Squid Games, and in the new season there's a trans character. The trans character is not necessarily bad, but every time there's one of those like, here's the trans character. We got to address, why do they have tits and why do they dress like that? Like there's a grandma that kind of like is the metaphor or the vehicle for like, hey, let's bring up the elephant in the room. And then like, okay, we got to go through this shit. And we both rolled our eyes because it's not well done. It's ham-fisted, right? And this was probably always been a historical issue in media, I would say, because it was probably just as ham-fisted when it was like, hey, I'm a white guy. Explain what being black is like, you know, to me. It's always preachy and it's boring. And when it lacks nuance, people go like, I don't fucking like it. I think that's where people are always basing this anti-wokeness argument really at the heart of it all.
Okay, well, it's possible, but at the same time, you have a trans roommate. Most people have never met a trans person in their lives, right? So, and that's at least that they know of. And that's just the fact. And so, I mean, even in California, I didn't meet a trans person until, 8 years ago was the first time I ever met a trans person that I knew that they were trans. Right. So so I think most people, I think the heart is in the right place in that it's kind of like, oh, we need to kind of educate people on this because most people will see it and go, what the fuck am I looking at? But regardless of trans or not, let's just take the male female. When you talk about Alyx being accepted, I mean, it's hard to tell. That wasn't a massive hit game. It was a critical hit game, but you needed VR for the longest time to play it. So the sales figures are hard to really judge, but you only saw her hands. Or Metroid, you don't know she's a woman until the end. In most of the games, she doesn't look like a woman. She just looks like, I mean, in the new one she does, but she just looks like a person in a suit of sci-fi armor. So look at Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is totally overtly sexual and overtly female, and I think that's really appealing, but I imagine if you're saying, if the stats are correct, 70% of men don't want to play as female characters. Wouldn't you agree that men who might have liked that game probably stayed away from it because they're like, I don't want to play that. That's a girl.
I think on the surface, yes, that can attribute to the fall off in a lot of sales. Like that's probably why Heavenly Sword didn't do that well, even though Noriko was super hot and was like kind of like an attempt at female Kratos and DMC style combat. So. Right. I'm not sure, but I would say that like once people get their hands on it and actually just play the game because it is a video game, like relating to the character matters less if the game is fun. But and yes, in some instances they are subverting, or like yes, it's a more immersive experience. So you're focused on hands. You're not thinking about sexual characteristics. It doesn't come into play. It does like being a woman is not. It's a factor, but it's not the most important factor. And, and a lot of media where they're trying to...
Well, here's what I want to say, because my mind has sort of changed on this. I used to take kind of a more of a soapbox approach to it, in that if you don't like this, you are somehow lesser. And I do think some of these studies do suggest that the more self-aware and the more kind of comfortable you are in your own skin, the more comfortable you are playing video games where you are able to take on roles that are not your own or roles that are not aspirational. But when I look at that stat and I go 70% of guys want to play guy characters because it makes it more immersive to them, it does make me kind of go, okay, maybe this has nothing to do with woke or anti-woke, and maybe this has nothing to do with progressive or conservative. Maybe this has everything, and maybe a lot of people don't express it that way because you get more clicks when you make it woke or anti-woke, but maybe it has nothing more to do with just preference of the stats.
During downtime.
Yeah, it's like, look, if I'm playing a game, I want to be, most guys, 70% of guys want to be who they can't be in the real world. That's what they want out of their experiences, at least at this kind of game, you know? And my mind has changed a little bit on that.
If I want to be a super badass assassin, I don't want to worry about trans rights while I'm going around, taking out the targets. I just want to have a good time. Like for the 2 hours that I've got at the end of my workday.
If you're playing it for that reason, that's right. Okay, man, I appreciate your thoughts. They make a lot of sense. Thanks, buddy.
All right, you have a good one, Jaffe.
You too, sir. In the chat, though, we have Gabriel says this is like arguing what food tastes better. The way people intake and process media is subjective. It is, but that's kind of the challenge, right? Is that when you have a stat, though, that says 70% of men like cheeseburgers, and you're opening a restaurant and you want to make a lot of money and compete against McDonald's, you probably are going to put cheeseburgers on the menu. So it's subjective, but when you have a vast majority of folks that say we like this and they are your primary customer, it may have nothing to do, or in some cases it does. Some cases they're fucking morons and they're anti-women, misogynist, transphobes. But in some cases, maybe the majority of cases, they're like, I just want what I want, which is I want to see myself in an idealized view. And in the chat, we have, and I've been saying this forever, and I agree, Turtle Rabbit Fox says modern games should all have character creators. I think if you're making a new game and it's above $100 million and it's narrative-based, you fucking if I was an executive, I would say, I don't care what your vision is. You put in a goddamn character creator. You can figure it out. You're a good enough writer, you're a good enough artiste that you can figure out to allow this character to look however the user wants. And then on top of it, I would open a cottage business. Like if you're Unreal, not that Epic needs any more fucking money, but I would love any game made in Unreal 5 to basically have a store for any character-generated game. Obviously, it would adjust for the art style of the game, but if I want Taylor Swift, and Taylor Swift has licensed her image rights to Epic, because I always like to make Taylor Swift in my character creators as characters I play, I just buy it. It's like buying a skin. In any game I have a character creator from Unreal 5, it's just my Taylor Swift version. I would love to fucking do that. Yeah, Cyberpunk did that. Not that, but they did either way. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to bring in Gabe. I'm scared to bring in Gabe because I owe him a PDF scan. I just haven't done it yet. Gabe, it's Jaffe. What's up, man?
Oh, hello. Yeah, I was here to remind you.
Tell me that's not why you're calling into my fucking show. But Gabe is the editor of PlayStation Magazine in, What part of the world?
Italy.
Italy. And there's a big God of War retrospective coming up. We've done a couple of interviews for it, and I'm got to get him a design document. But what do you want to talk about right now?
I sent you the cover, by the way, in DMs. If you check the fucking DMs,
it looks. I did check it. It looks great. It looks excellent. All right, what do you want to talk about? What's going on?
I was listening to the conversation about 70% of male, right? Preferring male characters.
Yes.
So first of all, I would like to know if there's the same study done on women.
Yes, there has been.
And what's the result?
9% of women like to play male characters. And when you figure out
9%?
9%. And when you ask why, it's because those women, just like the 30% of men that like to play female characters, and a lot of it is because those women, just like the 30% of men that like to play female characters, and a lot of it is because, let me read you exactly what it said. 70%.
Are you telling me that males are more inclusive than females then?
No. At least according to this, it says 30% of male gamers do the female because they like the flexibility of customization. They like the aesthetic appeal. They said 9% of women play as men because they score higher on destruction motivations such as chaos and mayhem. So if you're a woman and you really like the power fantasy, and only 10% of women clearly do, they will tend to play the male characters. So, and a lot of that is either societal, because they don't see women in the way that they want to see them, like power fantasy characters or whatever. But that's what the study says.
So here's my take. I really don't give a shit, and I really do give a shit. As in, I can absolutely play a game like somebody mentioned Resident Evil 3, or be it Stellar Blade, whatever. Like, if there's a female protagonist in the story, I don't give a shit. I can play it. But when I play an RPG, something where I have to create my character, I've been doing this since I was a kid. I have always made an older version of myself, which now that I'm 44, it's getting to be to the point where I'm kind of making myself.
Right. It's like you can't have a guy walking around. Well, I guess you could. You can play a wizard now. I'm going to be playing like a 6-month campaign D&D for the first time, and we're playing it on this channel. It'll be almost every Sunday, starting maybe this Sunday. And for you Gina fans, because the minute Gina showed up on the stream, all these people in the chats are like, where's Gina? What's Gina think? Well, she apparently is going to be playing a character as well. But, I struggle to make my character because I'm like, I really want to role play my character, and, I want to stay in character for the whole thing. And I can't be mean when I role play a character. Like, I was playing a D&D campaign recently, and I was playing what do they call that class of character? They kind of commune with the dead, and a warlock. I think I was playing a warlock. Okay. And in D&D, you have these patrons, and my patron came to me and said, look, I'm going to give you these powers, but you need to kind of be a little bit of an evil guy to take them. And I told my patron to go fuck himself, right? And that's not, and the DM was having to sort of adjust to that, because a warlock is supposed to be able to be comfortable with that. But I just can't role play an asshole. Right. And so
I'm with you on that.
There is such a really fascinating, to me anyway, study as it relates to sort of designers and sort of what they need to know to make decisions about their games, about the psychology of why we game and why we make choices in games. And it seems that there's so many different reasons that people choose this gender, this race, this type of character in terms of, are you mean, are you fair, are you evil, that it's an overwhelming thing that it's almost like I want all that information before I ever think about designing another video game, which I always
do a good guy run in every game where there's a choice, not by choice. It's just what I'm in my mind supposed to do, But after that run, I usually try to do an asshole run. And the biggest one was in the very first Fallout back in the day, where you could actually kill kids. And you'd get a title. You were a child killer, and they would hunt you down and whatnot. So yeah, I can have a little bit of fun with that.
Do you? But, I need to try. Maybe I just need to let go and try it. Maybe it's because somewhere in my mind, I think it's like that movie with Ryan Reynolds where he played the video game NPC. Even though I know that these aren't real people probably, it's like it gets into a whole thing of like simulation theory, right? Like
you feel bad. Yeah.
Well, and think about this. It's like, if we are in a simulation, like I'm playing Call of Duty last night and I'm dying all the time. And I'm thinking about simulation theory and I'm like, okay, if we were to actually create a simulation theory, we probably would create it like, or if you were to try to create the most immersive video game ever and it was Call of Duty and we could make it so you didn't know you were playing a video game, we would do that. Right? Because that would be the most immersive version of Call of Duty is because otherwise life is cheap, it means nothing. And so if this is a simulation, it makes all the sense in the world that we don't know what's after this. And it makes so much sense to me, to my brain. I'm not saying I have no proof of this, and I'm not saying this is what I fully believe, but it makes all the sense in the world to me that the minute we die, we take our headset off and go, oh, that was awesome. Right? because why wouldn't we? Yeah. Why would we know? It would break the immersion, So anyway, buddy, I will get that PDF to you this week
make a note. I want to see you physically make a note on stream right now.
Yeah, that's not happening. But okay, I took the note. There you go. I'll do it. Thanks, buddy.
Have a good night.
You too, sir. All right, let me bring in one more person, then we'll get to the next topic. This is Ikwochi. Ikwochi, it's Jaffe. What's going on, bud? What do you want to talk about? What's going on?
Yeah, about the main character, like whole topic about the main character. Personally, it's weird how I get why men don't want to play as, female, because most gamers, if you look at like most gamers, like of course they look at themselves and they're not like the most in shape kind of people, and they feel like nobody cares about them. So when you look at a character like Kratos or Joel or Nathan Drake, they want to be that kind of person. So I understand why they're so fixated on just having all these strong, beefy kind of male-dominated main characters rather than having someone like Ellie or Abby. Even Abby, like Abby is very like badass and she can whoop the shit out of motherfuckers too. And she's relatable as hell. Like I love Abby, I love Ellie. They're both relatable. Even I'm a fucking dude, but I can relate to Ellie and Abby. Even now they're female-based characters. Rather than someone like, how can I say, than like Nathan Drake were in that way. Like they're like, if you can relate to anybody, I feel male or female, like,
So you're saying though, you don't have a problem if you like the character, it doesn't matter to you whether it's male or female.
Oh, hell no. It doesn't matter. Like, of course, I would rather play as a male because it's a dude. But if it's a female and she's well written,
but wait a minute. Why would you rather play? So, did you play Resident Evil 2, the remake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I just finished it actually.
Okay. Who did you play as first? Who was your first choice? The girl character, Jill, Claire, or who's the male in that game? It's not Leon, is it? Is it Chris?
I don't know. Okay. I don't know the name.
Okay, whoever the male was, who did you play first?
Oh, of course I picked the dude.
Why, of course, though? Because I didn't. Most people who played that game picked the male, according to Capcom. So what was the reason when you say, of course I picked the dude?
Well, it's because he's a man. So, of course, it's easier to resonate with a man. As a man, it's easier to resonate with a man rather than a woman. But I have no issue with if I had to play with Jill first, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't be, why I gotta play with Jill? You know what I mean?
And maybe it's something that you can learn kind of about yourself, right? Because for me, and I've said this before, I feel very masculine in only a couple of areas of my life. I'm not one of these guys that's like, I'm fucking gonna drive fast and get in bar fights and lift weights, and I don't give a fuck about any of that. But when it comes to when it comes to work, and when it comes to creativity, and when it comes to sort of ambitious aspects of things I care about, at least I think I'm alpha as fuck. But anything else, you may as well, like I've said before, check for a vagina, because I'm sure it's there somewhere. And I'm very comfortable with that, but maybe that's why for me, like when you're like, oh, totally, I pick the guy first because I want to be that guy. I pick the girl usually first if she's attractive because I thought she was real sexy in that game. So, which isn't to say that other men that pick the male don't also think that Claire Redfield is attractive. It's just that it's interesting to me that that's my driving reason. Whereas for a lot of guys, at least 70%, it's more about the kind of guy you want to be, That
is true too, because a lot of them, it feeds into that kind of stereotype of what a man should be or what you should aspire to be.
Which and some of that's healthy and true, and some of that might just be media. Like in the chat, Spectrum Blast says, why is that the stereotype? Literally, not all guys are masculine and think about driving fast and getting into fights. Stereotyping much? Yes, I am.
A lot of them want to be that, though.
Right,
they don't
right.
Want that,
That's
but
right.
They want that in them.
That's right. So there are two types. There are the guys that are actually that way, and the guys where society says you're supposed to be this way. And those are the majority, at least based on this specific statistic, when it comes to video games that we're talking about.
Yeah, personally for me, that's why I'm not so like up in arms, like especially with Intergalactic. Like Intergalactic is gonna be a fucking awesome video game. We all know that Neil Druckmann can fucking write characters. But I'm not like, oh, why is it not a male? Why is it Troy Baker not playing the male? Like, cause I'm like, dude, like,
because Troy Baker's busy. Troy Baker can't play every fucking video game character.
I know, like that's what I'm saying. Like, but I'm not. The reason I'm not up in arms because like people want to escape into a reality. This and that they're in play as a man because I can relate. But like, dude, if she can be relatable and she's a woman, it doesn't matter. Does it really matter? She's gonna kick some ass. She got a fucking power sword and everything. Like, is it really that deep? It's a video game. You play for 2 hours and then you gotta get back to the real world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. All right, interesting call. Thank you, buddy. I love that you called. Please call back anytime. See you, buddy.
Oh yeah, man. I'm gonna try and call back more.
All right, man. See you soon. Spectrum says, but you can't say all guys are like that. I didn't say all guys are like that. He says that's what's wrong with people and then complain later on. Just because some people do bad things doesn't mean everyone is like that. Yeah, I didn't say everyone is like that. But in this case, 70% of the men that were surveyed are claiming that's the reason that they do this. I'm not that kind of a guy. Clearly, I agree with you, Spectrum Blast.